Welcome to Cultivated Live for Wednesday, December 11th, I think is the date. That sounds about right. My name is Jay Rosenthal. That is Jeremy Burke. We are co-founders of Cultivated Media. Jeremy is the editor-in-chief. I'm the managing director. He writes the awesome newsletter. I do the mediocre live stream every day. Welcome, everybody. We are getting back to it from our time in Las Vegas, which is why my voice still sounds like this. And since we launched Cultivated, let me just give a quick intro. About a year ago, we have been industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every single day in our newsletter. Get our newsletter in your inbox every day at cultivated.news. Watch this stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. We would certainly appreciate it. And welcome for those tuning in on Jeremy's, I'm still going to call it Twitter feed, Jeremy. You still have a vibrant Twitter feed.
Vibrant is one word for it, but I'm still on there. So
well, you know how to ruffle feathers. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's I'm taking the platform as seriously as Elon Musk wants me to take it.
That's right. That's right. You are stirring the pot as intended. Obviously. So welcome everybody on that platform. Welcome everybody on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Jeremy, you and I just got back from Las Vegas. I wrote about some of the takeaways that I had last week, including, I don't know, where the industry is today, people's outlook on tomorrow. What were some of your sort of top line takeaways from we had like a million conversations, so both on air and off air, but what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah. I think, look, I think the industry is, I'm not going to be pessimistic on it, but it was a little bit more sparsely attended. It was a little bit more mellow, a little bit less crazy on the after party. So, there was that aspect and you could see it live. But, the second thing I'll say is that of the people that were there, like these are the people that are still in the cannabis industry that are dedicated to it. Right. And it was pretty good to see those people that, I've been going to MJBiz, I think for, almost 7 years now. I think this is my sixth one. And seeing the same people there in 2018 that are still in business was quite remarkable. And, not to be the total pessimist, but that gives me a little bit of optimism, right? That people are still in it. We're still building this big industry and the opportunities are still there. It's just a matter of getting there. Time will tell how long that takes.
Yeah, there were some gray hairs like me. But I thought, there was less irrational exuberance. That's not a word we often use, but certainly that existed in cannabis 2017, 2018, certainly from a Canadian perspective. I remember when big Canadian companies had massive booths there, which didn't seem to make a lot of sense at the time. Right. And they're not there anymore. So there's been a cycle through. I think you're right. Like the players that have been there a long time that we've seen at all these events for a long time seem more weathered, more realistic, but also not completely pessimistic, right? And I think this came up both earlier in the year at Benzinga, certainly in this conversation. I think we had it with Patrick Ray. We had it with other operators who've been around that, if you could weather this storm, and you will have to weather a storm, and, you will be stronger for it, for sure. The other part of that, I don't know if it's the opposite side of that same coin, is don't bank on major reform happening because it's very uncertain. And even I believe it will happen. The timeline is very uncertain. So if you want to bank on it for 2025, that's probably not a great business. Is that what you heard too?
No, absolutely. Right. I think, you can hope for federal reform and we can all work towards that. Those of us who are participating in the industry. But if it's in your business plans that it's going to be legalized in the next 6 months or that maybe anything will happen, I think you're going to be left wanting. Prepare for the status quo. I think that's what we're hearing from a lot of investors, a lot of businesses. Just prepare for the status quo, control what you can control. And it's a bonus if any reform happens. And I think that's what we heard in a lot of our podcasts, a lot of our conversations on the showroom floor.
Yeah. One thing that I did want to mention is that there's been some chatter. This was on the floor, but also since on Twitter. We're in this lame duck period at Congress where there's like 2 more weeks and then we flip the calendar. January, new Congress, inauguration, all that. There was some hope, and maybe hope casting or wish casting that safe banking would get a vote. I followed DC for a long time, and not just on this issue. This is what happens. Like you think things are going to happen in the lame duck session. It rarely does.
Yeah. Look, I don't have that much insight right now into the specific backroom machinations of what Schumer is telling McConnell, et cetera. But I think, from the beginning, these announcements that they're going to try for safe banking the lame duck, I think we're pretty doomed. There is a bit of a sliver of hope, but just yesterday, Marijuana Moment reported an article that said Schumer, someone close to Schumer, said the Republicans are blocking him. That was to be expected. And passing something controversial like cannabis banking in a big must-pass spending bill was a pretty tough path to begin with. It looks like that path is now non-existent. Schumer could, for all his warts, really could bring it to a floor vote. It's unlikely. I'm sure he sees the calculus. I'm sure he sees the writing on the wall that it won't pass, and he's not going to do that. But that remains an option. I think we're punting till the next Congress to see if there's any movement on cannabis banking reform. And I think the path ahead is a little bit murky, right? Republicans do control or will control the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, is from a state that does not have legal cannabis, that voted legal cannabis down. So then his incentive to do anything on it, I think, is low. That's my sort of glass half empty look at safe banking's prospects for next year. Of course, I could be wrong.
You could be wrong, but I don't know if you are wrong. We'll only know when we do the same show.
We'll only know in the future. Yeah.
We'll only know in the future.
Yeah.
I did see something funny that I haven't seen people post this as it relates to cannabis reform, but I saw this picture on Twitter from my, left-leaning Twitter people, but take a look at this. Like, do you think those people are talking cannabis reform at Mar-a-Lago yesterday?
They better be. Look, at the end of the day, RFK, despite my disagreements with him on vaccines and anything else, he is a champion of cannabis reform. He does have Trump's ear. He's there at Mar-a-Lago. He's there with Mike Tyson, who, is a luminary of sorts of the industry. And hopefully they're talking about it. Hopefully they're getting in Trump's ear. Like, that is a vehicle that could be really useful for the industry to pursue.
Well, Mike Tyson may be the only person that flew directly from Las Vegas to Mar-a-Lago to go, from MJBiz to Mar-a-Lago. So if that's our advocate, I guess that's mediocre, I think, at best. Although, stranger things have happened with stranger advocates for sure.
Yeah.
One other thing that came across my desk today, not my desk, but Twitter or maybe LinkedIn, and we had a couple of conversations about this in Las Vegas as well, is what's happening in Minnesota. I think there was hope that by mid-year 2025, the first adult use recreational cannabis dispensaries would be open in that state, and maybe they still will be. But the first round of social equity lottery licensees, I think it was 2 weeks ago, got notified that the applicants, like 2/3 of them, got bounced, and there was not a ton of reason why. Some of those people that got bounced in that lottery have filed suit. That's still pending. So there's that sort of unknown. We talked about that with a couple of lawyers and a couple of advocates and a couple of sort of business people in Minnesota. We'll post those as I edit them. But it looks like the Office of Cannabis Management in Minnesota, not yet because it's only 9 a.m. in Minnesota, but we'll actually be having a press conference or an announcement at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central. Who knows what they'll say? It's sort of but it is interesting that they are going to be saying something in the midst of a lawsuit. So we will see what happens there. But there's lots of conversation in Minnesota about this lawsuit, but also around hemp in Minnesota.
Right.
It seems like for a state we don't other than sort of this part, don't often think about, it does seem to be at the center of the cannabis world right now.
Yeah, look, it's a big new state. It's coming online. It's populous. It has big. The Twin Cities are very large cities, very large market. And look, I think what Minnesota is going through seems to be what every state market goes through when they're opening. They're trying to balance these concerns with social equity, with having enough supply, with bringing the price down to a point where consumers want to buy legal. These are challenging policy goals to fulfill. And oftentimes the government is getting involved in ways that people will sue over, right? By selecting social equity applicants to come in first, you can sort of like that message or that incentive it creates for the market. At the same time, you do have to expect that people will sue over that. If you look at New York's experience, you look at other states' experiences, these are pretty predictable ebbs and flows of how these markets start. Unfortunately, predictable ebbs and flows of how these markets start. But look, we'll be watching Minnesota pretty closely. It's a pretty exciting market. Ohio nearby just legalized. And so there's a lot happening in the Midwest. And I think it's pretty exciting if they can get through the initial turbulence here.
Yeah, and the neighboring governor, Tony Evers, in Wisconsin, also wants to legalize. The Republican majority in both, I guess, legislatures in Wisconsin is not keen to do that. But the other thing in Minnesota that I think it was Jen Riza, she's a lawyer in Minnesota. I think the quote was, she was like proud of what's happening in Minnesota when it comes to hemp, which is there's hemp-derived THC beverages, hemp-derived THC edibles that are already available, widely available in Minnesota. She described it, and I thought this was interesting, that many of her clients that are in the hemp industry now are doing it as an on-ramp to the adult use market in Minnesota when cannabis comes online. And that's actually creating interesting new opportunities for entrepreneurs in Minnesota. I wonder if we zoom that out a bit to sort of nationwide. There are brands being built in hemp-derived THC products that are doing it in ways the cannabis industry just can't. I wonder if we'll see, and I don't know when we'll see it or if we'll see it, but the first business that is started as a hemp-derived THC business, sort of, and building brands, whether it's on beverage, I think beverages is probably the most natural one, that are being shipped around the country in many, many markets and traditional sort of non-cannabis streams, really, become a national brand on the cannabis side too. Like, I like what she said, and it was interesting about Minnesota, but I wonder if we couldn't move that out to sort of a macro level to say this beverage or that brand is going to be a national cannabis brand, but started in the hemp industry. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point. And I think we had Adam Terry of Cantrip on a couple months ago, and he got to something similar about this, right? He said this hemp-derived beverages are kind of the tip of the spear for the cannabis industry. Like, someone who is not going to go into a dispensary and know the difference between sativa and indica is, they might be at a liquor store or grocery store and say, like, what is this, low dose cannabis beverage, right? Like, they may try it, they may like it, and that creates a new consumer if they like what they try. And it also allows them to get brand awareness in states that don't necessarily have legal regulated markets, right? Like, if you are a hemp-derived beverage, you can be in a lot of states. Now, some are cracking down. Texas and California are making moves to do that. But you can be in a lot of states, and you can really get people used to your product, used to your brand. You can even advertise in ways that, core cannabis businesses cannot. Fair or not, I think people are on both sides of that question, depending on what market they're in. But it really is a kind of Trojan horse for getting your brand out there, getting consumers interested in your product. And it's something that, I think a lot of smart cannabis companies can and should do in the next year while we wait for federal reform.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing it like people starting in hemp and moving to cannabis. That's sort of what she described. We've also seen the other, where certainly big cannabis companies are doing the reverse, where they're saying, like, we are in this regulated cannabis market. We're also going to be in this hemp-derived market, where we're going to launch brands on the hemp-derived side. I think we've seen Curaleaf and some others do it. And actually Organogram here in Canada also making waves in that space too. It is interesting to watch this play out. And I wonder if in 2025, we don't see two things. One, people complaining about this hemp and cannabis sort of challenge, but also more players going both ways.
Yeah. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, and we've written this in the newsletter a lot. I think we've said this a lot on the live streams. Like, it's the same desired effect. Like, no consumers are saying, oh, I prefer the Delta 9 hemp over the cannabis, right? Like, they just want the feeling of what cannabis brings them, and they're looking for that. And so at the end of the day, it is only a quirk of regulators who might not completely understand what they were regulating in 2018 in the Farm Bill that bifurcated the industry like this, right? Like, it's the same industry. I think it makes sense for everyone to try and work together. That being said, there are people solely on the cannabis side who have very real concerns with how this is going, because they have much more expensive compliance costs. They're paying more taxes. They're very regulated in ways that the hemp players are not. And I think that's fair to be concerned about that. But at the end of the day, it is one industry, right? It's one industry that should work together for regulations that make sense for everyone.
Yeah, from your mouth to everybody's ears, Jeremy, because I know that's not the case.
People might not like that, but we can say
it's not the case right now. But it'll be, certainly we're going to be writing about it. I don't know if it's everyday writing, but certainly it's going to be written about a lot over the next months and year probably as well. I want to switch gears just for a second. Did you happen to get to a dispensary in Las Vegas while you were there?
I did. I went to Planet 13, which is the only one I went to just because it was kind of close to the airport and it was on my way in. lot of interesting products. I know you had some interesting experiences with Nevada's product selection.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because you talk about quirk and regulations.
Yeah.
We went not to Planet 13, but I think it's called Cultivate. I know there's a Cultivate there.
Mhm.
I mean, they have products that I don't know are even legal in many places. First of all, they had like a 400 milligram edible, not in one place, but it was like in one package.
Yeah.
And in that, there was like 4 different varietals. Like one was like THC and caffeine, like straight up caffeine and cannabis, which is certainly not legal in Canada. I don't think it's legal in most opposite. Then they had a different one, same brand. I don't remember the brand. It was THC and like B12. Like, so it was like B vitamin sort of energizing. And then there was others that had, I don't think it had melatonin, but there was like other ones to like help you sleep that were THC, CBN, and maybe one other. So like they're doing things in Nevada that I don't even know if you could do in other places, but also, Nevada is a unique market, and it's everywhere, and they're advertising it everywhere too, which I think is the biggest difference between Nevada and most places.
Yeah. I think someone on I'm blanking on who it was, but someone on our show talked about how dispensaries represent, the local culture of the state they're in, right? Nevada, it's freedom, right? Like put whatever you want in those, and people, it's consumer choice. Like New York is very, very much regulated, and it's a blue state like California, and so it's highly taxed, it's regulated, and the products on store shelves reflect this kind of local geography and local politics. And I think that's a pretty interesting sort of academic lens to take on the cannabis industry. Like whenever I'm in a new state that has legal products, I always like to see like, how big the labels are, like, are the products behind glass, or can you get a little bit closer to them? And that has a lot of ramifications for how the state is regulating the industry and how the local population kind of feels about cannabis in certain ways. And I think it's pretty fascinating to see.
Yeah, I want to zoom in on that point, and then we'll let you go and get everybody on with their day. I think you may not have been there when we interviewed Bliss and Lex dispensary in New York. They're relatively new. I think they opened in March, but they actually embodied what you're talking about, sort of the local, but also what Josh Kesselman from Raw said is like, understand your customers, ask them what they want. Now, they are card licensees in New York. We know card licensees in New York have had a challenging time, but these two, so I think it's Chris and Nicole Lucien from Bliss and Lex, like they opened their shop. They didn't have $1 million inventory order. They had an order that they could get by the next couple of weeks because they wanted to see what their customers wanted. They include their bud tenders in inventory decisions because they want their bud tenders bought in to what they know what the customers want, and they don't want to have things on shelves that the customers don't want and the bud tenders won't sell. They've like taken, I mean, I certainly haven't been listening to everything Krista and I talk about on Thursdays, but they have taken the best learnings from people in New York, and it seems like they're doing great. And they told us they're looking at their next shop. So like it's encouraging, especially in New York, to hear about operators, especially card licensees, that are actually doing it great and sort of on the path to success, which is not always the story we hear about New York.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll just say one thing about New York. There's been a lot for us to cover, right? Like as a journalist, I think a little bit of market turbulence is not always a bad thing selfishly, because it keeps your days interesting, and it keeps people calling you on the phone, and it gives you stuff to write about. Look, at the same time, I think towards the end of 2024, just a couple weeks away from the end of the year, New York's about to sell $1 billion of cannabis finally in the legal market, right? Like it's finally time to be excited and bullish about this market. And as a New Yorker, I'm really, really excited about that. There's finally new dispensaries opening up every day. There are great products. There's excitement in the city about the cannabis industry for the first time since the MRTA was passed in 2021. And so, look, like I think New York's going to be a big story, but on the positive side going into next year. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to cover.
Well, we're going to put together, maybe you and I will put together what we're expecting for 2025. We can talk about hemp versus cannabis. We can talk about the New York market. We can talk about Minnesota, and we'll put that out the first week in January. But if you keep calling yourself a New Yorker, they're going to take away your Canadian passport, just so you know.
Or they're going to stop New Yorker. Yeah.
They're going to stop you at the border in Buffalo. Jeremy, thank you for making time today. Great to see you in Las Vegas in person, and great show today, and we'll connect with you later.
Thank you, Jay.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with Krista Raymer, as always, on Thursdays, talking about cannabis retail. I'm interested in what she saw in Las Vegas as well, both in situ at a dispensary, but also in her conversations. I'm Jay Rosenthal. That's Jeremy Burke. We are Cultivated Media. We will see everybody tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, on our LinkedIn channel and on our YouTube channel, and get our newsletter every day at cultivated.news. Thanks, Jer.
Thanks, Jay.